This is a mid-60s Fender black panel deluxe reverb, vintage, almost all original. This might be the greatest amplifier ever built. In this video, we're going to talk about why that is. We're going to let you hear it, give you the history on these amplifiers, and we might even compare it to a modern production vintage spec deluxe reverb at the end. I'm going to give you a spoiler. This one sounds better. Welcome to our Amps Edition video. This is Amps with Friends. So I want to introduce you to Riggs Taylor. Riggs is a staff member at the church that we play guitar at, which is Shades Mountain Baptist Church here in Birmingham, Alabama, and has an awesome YouTube channel of his own. Subscribe because this is Riggs' amp. Spoiler. He's going to tell you a little bit about it. Before we get into this, though, we have presets available based on this actual amp, and when you hear it, as you've been hearing it, this one is a good one. So all that is linked below. You can get it for all the platforms. That's not what this video is about. That's all we're going to say about the presets, but you should buy them. So Riggs, tell us about this amp.
Yeah, so the Deluxe Reverb, a favorite amp of mine, obviously one of the most recorded amps of all time.
Would you say, what would be the most recorded amp? A Tweed Deluxe?
I would say Deluxe Reverb probably beats it. And the only reason is, especially if we factor in what a lot of people, their first serious amp now is one of the reissues.
Yeah.
But so even factoring in all of those bands that have that, but the Deluxe Reverb is super versatile, which we're going to show off. That does a lot more than just the Fender clean thing. But like a few modern players that I really like that have been known to record with them, John Mayer.
Yeah.
Obviously. You have guys like Julian Lage, who's a jazz guitar player, very prolific jazz guitar player, incredible player, one of my favorite guitar players. Yeah. He tours with Deluxe Reverbs, so you have a wide range of players that play them. You have all kinds of tracks that have been recorded that you're like, man, that sounds like a Marshall, or that sounds like a Tweed Deluxe. Plot twist, it's a black panel Deluxe on 10, which we'll have to show off too, because that's one of my absolute favorite sounds. So this one I got from the son of the original owner in Adiata, Alabama, which is about 45 minutes north of here.
That? Yeah.
It's the middle of nowhere, a little bit north of Birmingham. So I got on Facebook Marketplace one day, and I saw a listing for Deluxe Reverb. There was this one, and there was a reissue.
Okay.
This one was one his dad bought new in the 60s and 67.
Cool.
This one is has some late 66 part codes and then early 67 on a few of the pots, meaning that it would have left in 67. But I drove up during a tornado in April of 2021 to Oniata, Alabama. Bad weather's supposed to hit that afternoon. I'm driving up in my small Toyota hatchback.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I have to get this amp. And the only reason I got it was because I messaged him 2 minutes after he listed it. I was sure there was a line out the door to get it.
Because you told me the price.
Yes.
You got a deal.
It was very fair. It was very fair. I was happy to pay asking price. So I get in my car. I'm driving up. Torrential downpour.
Okay.
The tornadoes really didn't come through till 1 or 2 o'clock. But I was like, I have to get this amp.
Yeah.
And it was a little sketchy on the back roads, but I got it. I met the guy, Ricky, awesome dude. His dad had passed away at 98. Just the year before.
Owner.
The original owner, passed away at 98. Was not a gigging musician. Played it around the house. Also bought the reissue, but he was like, Dad always liked the old one more, and I think it's easy to see why.
Yeah.
Ricky follows my YouTube channel
that's cool.
and like still comments on videos and stuff a ton. So it's been really
Ricky.
cool. Hey Ricky, thanks again. It's been really cool to be part of this amps story, and it's a desert island amp for me.
So what are some of the specs on, so like if you buy a modern, like a current production 65 reissue, which you can get, they're not super expensive from Fender.
No, of course everything's gone up.
You can get
they're like $15.99 now.
Yeah, you can get the 64 hand-wired edition, and that's like $2,700.
Wow, that's way more fun.
Yeah. But you can get a 65 reissue, and it's going to be sort of the same specs for wattage.
Yep.
So what are the specs on this?
So you're looking at roughly 20 to 22 watts.
Yeah.
Somewhere in that kind of range. 112-inch speaker. This one is completely original, except it has had one of the filter. Well, it's had a filter cap job. So filter capacitors do not affect tone. That is power. That's like power filtering, that kind of thing.
And you have to replace those over time.
You have to replace those. But this one's super clean. Again, everything on it is original, except it's missing this little silver cap right here on the knob.
Come on.
But one thing about the Deluxe Reverb that I love is it is a 2-channel amp. Everybody uses the vibrato channel for the reverb, and it's incredible. But even with the reverb off, you're still running through an extra half of a 12AX7.
Yep.
Tube talk. A 12AX7 has a dual triode, is the type of tube. So the reverb only runs off one half of that. So your audio signal at all times is still going through the other half of it, which is why a lot of people like the way the reverb channel sounds more if you just had, say, this at 3 and this at 3, because it's got a little bit more gain. It's got a little bit more on the front end when you pick a note, right? It's a little bit more sensitive, but the normal channel's awesome too, and we talked about this the other day. You had a lot of players that actually preferred non-reverb Deluxes and Princetons because it had more headroom. So if you ran this amp on 10 on the volume on the normal channel and the vibrato channel, they would sound very different.
The vibrato has more gain.
More gain, and I think it's a little bit brighter. Of course, some of that can be part tolerance, and you can compensate for it, but it's really cool to be able to run an AB box and run both, which is something I rarely see anybody do with Deluxes, which is shocking.
Yeah, because you can set up a clean and a driven.
Yeah.
You can do all kinds of stuff.
Clean and dirty, and again, we'll let you see why you might want to run your Deluxe really high.
Yeah, we'll show you. I has what kind of a speaker? Because they built them with different types of speakers.
Yes, so this
Fender, Leo just put whatever he had into these things.
Yes, and a lot of it was similar spec. Now, this one has an original Oxford in it.
Yeah.
I'm always hesitant with original speakers because I've played a lot that were just worn out.
Yeah.
Flubby, didn't sound great. This one is exceptional sounding. Zach Childs from Ask Zach, will link his channel down below. Cool. He was Brad Paisley's guitar tech for a while. He knows these amps in and out. I took this one up to Nashville and we played it, and he also really liked it and gave it the seal of approval, because you don't always find that with an original speaker in a Deluxe. So this one's all original. This one's got a ton of old tubes in the preamp section, a mix of Telefunkens, RCAs, GEs. It does have new power tubes and a new rectifier tube, but they're actually older Tesla branded JJs. So the tubes in this amp are actually probably way past spec, but the guy never really played it.
Yeah.
So I have some new old stock ones ready to go whenever these are ready to go out. I just haven't gotten around to it because it honestly sounds great.
All right, so we've covered like the objective stuff about this amp, like how you got it, when it was made, what the specs are, what the speaker is, all that kind of stuff. Subjectively, though, we titled this video, "It Might Be the Greatest Amp Ever Made." Clearly, that's up to opinion.
Absolutely.
Like my favorite amp and your favorite amp might be different, or greatest amp. But why? Let's make a case why this could be the greatest amp ever.
For me, the reason I like a Deluxe and why it's one of the amps that if you told me, like, look, I'm not a Fender loyalist. There's a lot of great amps out there. I mean, we live in a golden age of, we were talking earlier, Benson's, Two Rocks, you know, all of these amps that I would be happy to play live.
Yeah.
But the reason why I think the Deluxe hits a sweet spot is, even, it doesn't matter if I've done studio session work. I mean, I've done gigs with this amp in front of 10,000 people. I've done gigs with this amp in front of 50 people and a few hundred people. And it's excelled every time because I can get it in a nice sweet spot, even if I'm in a smaller room. That's not too loud. It's tameable.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing about the Deluxe Reverb that people say is, well, 2 is basically off and 3 is too loud, depending on the space that you're in.
That's a tube amp in general, almost.
Exactly.
Right.
But one of the things that I love about this, again, you've got reverb and clean tones to die for. I think everybody that likes the Fender sound at all will agree with that.
It is the quintessential Fender sound.
It is the quintessential Fender sound. To me, if you are thinking or talking about the Fender clean sound, I think a Deluxe is that. A Super Reverb sounds great. A Princeton sounds great. Yeah. And there's so many variations within the same circuit that's, oh, this is basically just a Deluxe with a 15-inch speaker. Yeah. But I think the reason why this one has stood the test of time and been reissued so many times in various forms, time and time again, is because it really does strike that marriage of it's got enough umph for your gig. And for most of us nowadays, the reason it works in front of 10,000 people is because I'm going to stick a microphone in front of it.
Yeah.
So you've got the clean tones to die for. Less known, but known by a lot of Nashville cats that, you know, you've got one amp that you've got to do everything with. When you turn this amp up, and actually Justin Ostrander, I just saw his channel recently, incredible Nashville players, played on a lot of great songs. He did a video about the Deluxe Reverb, and one of his favorite settings is similar to mine. Just turn the volume up to 10, and actually you dump the bass out completely. That's the trick. And you still got that like low mid range, and then you can kind of dial in treble to taste, and you get that Marshall thing. It feels like you're playing a baby Marshall. Yeah. And it's an incredible sound that's still not going to peel paint. The thing about this amp in particular, when you get the volume above 5, it doesn't get any louder. It just gets gainier and more compressed. So instead of being too loud at that gainy volume, I can set it clean on the normal channel and on the vibrato channel, have it turned up, and I can get get these wide variety of tones just by switching channels or just using a simple AB box. That's what, 30 or 40 bucks?
Yeah.
Instead of an overdrive pedal, which in 2024 is going to run you a few hundred most likely.
Yeah.
Great for gigging. They record super well for the same reason. You can get a wide swath of tones out of them. And I think part of the reason why we're biased to thinking one of these amps, similar to something like an AC30 or a JTM 45, is one of the greatest amps of all time, is because it has just been around so long. It's been on so many records.
You've heard it more times than you know. The Fender tone is not my favorite tone. Right. So when we say greatest amp, we're not saying it's the best sounding amp ever made.
I might be.
You might be. This one in particular too. What is it about this one that sounds so good? We'll show you that little AB at the end with compared to the Alessandro rebuilt thing. Like I would say maybe Vox AC30 is my favorite type of an amp, or like a Matchless or something. But it's hard to argue with like how great this sounds clean, how great it sounds as a pedal platform. That's another thing.
Yeah, huge.
I mean, we've been hearing it in this video with pedals as well as just straight into it. It sounds really good with pedals. It sounds really good when you break it up. This one, like not all Fenders sound awesome when you turn them all the way up. Some of them get like flubby and loose.
Especially the reissues. That's why people think they don't sound like. I have tried. I've played so many of them.
Yeah.
I've sat next to probably 3 or 4 different ones with this amp in the same room.
Yeah.
And even sitting down with another guitar player that owns it or something, they're like, that's so different.
Yeah.
We won't say totally different. It's very different.
It's different. Yeah, this one is tight. When you drive it, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And the good deluxes do that. So it's not just this one.
This is something that can get me there, where I'm happy and I'm really excited about the tones that I'm getting.
It's good. It's good. You've been hearing so far in the video, we're running a pedal board into this to show you what it sounds like as a pedal platform. And you'll hear more of that as well. But we also wanted just to plug straight into the thing and go through some of our favorite settings on the amp. Just so you can hear what it sounds like. So we're mic'd up with a Royer 121 and an Earthworks SR25. That's sort of our mic setup that we use here at Worship Tutorials. We're running those two mics into a Neve 1073 DPX, one of the stereo 1073. Tiny bit of EQ on the Neve, but not a lot. So, and these mics are just right off the cap of the speaker. What are you playing here, Riggs? This is a cool guitar.
So this is my Frank Brothers. This is the arcade model, is what it's known as. So this one is fully solid. They have a chambered kind of version that's a little bit different. So this one is Carina. This also has a set of Cremas by our friend Curtis over at Lambertone's Pickups. Thanks, Curtis.
Yeah.
This guitar originally had a full set of Sunbear pickups, and I kept the Sunbird middle pickup, which is a Firebird. So Sunbear Stu is based out of the UK. Incredible pickup maker. This guitar has a lot of mid-range naturally, which you'll kind of hear. And the Cremas just kind of flattened it out a little bit in a nice way. And I grew up a Tele player and Strat player, still play both those guitars a lot. But this has become my go-to guitar for everything. So that's it.
Well, let's hear it.
Yeah.
That was neck pickup?
It's neck pickup.
Ah, what does it sound like on the bridge?
both together. For fun, bridge and Firebird middle for some stratty tones. Neck and middle.
Frank and your other brother Frank, if you'd like to send one of these to worship tutorials, I'd probably like that. That's a cool guitar, man.
It's cool.
Okay, so what else? Show us some more what this thing does.
If I'm going clean, or if I'm having to be volume conscious, that's why I run it. However, my kind of go-to setting is. Yeah. This is really complicated. You go up to about 4.
Oh, yeah.
And usually, I'll let you hear what this sounds like without any reverb. Okay. So if I'm running this as a pedal platform live, and I'm using, say, a reverb pedal or something because I want to have control, I actually am old school and will occasionally use the reverb foot switch. Believe it or not, people still use
the vibrato as well?
I do not, because I'm a harmonic tremolo guy.
Okay.
And that is the main reason. But I'll run sometimes a little bit of reverb on the amp and channel switch or AB like I talked about earlier. But this is my go-to sound for most everything. Still cleans up nicely. This guitar has treble bleeds, I should mention, so... fills out those clean tones a little bit. Again, I might run the reverb on 2.5 or 3, somewhere in here. When you dig in, you get some real nice... edge of breakup, as the kids say.
That is the edge of breakup. That's where I would run it as well.
And one of my favorite secret tones in this.
Well, I want to say we captured it like where you had it on 3 was like our 2 capture.
Okay, yeah.
And then this would be like our 3 capture if you've got the capture pack or whatever.
Great. Yeah. Yeah.
So we're gonna hear this thing sound like a Marshall, aren't we?
Yes, we are. Okay. So one of my favorite sounds is. I'll show you with the bass all the way where it is right now. So bass and treble again, right around midway. We'll kill the reverb. This amp above 5 just gets more compressed. So let's just, for fun, let's go to 6. Okay, so this
you can hear it. I mean, there's a hum. We apologize. We are sitting
there's a little something
right next to an old tube amp.
So this is 6, and then I'll show you what 10 sounds like. Okay. So chords again. I record there a lot.
If I heard that and I would never guess that was a deluxe reverb. Because I instinctively think to myself, Fenders turned up don't sound that great.
That
sounds great.
Everybody's misconception. This is why I love this amp on 10. I'll show you right now where the bass where it currently is, and then we'll dump the bass, and you'll really get some high gain Marshall sound. The bass out completely.
That's cool.
And that's most of how I use this amp. Now, if you were going to, if you were using this live, right, the great thing about captures is you can keep it in the sweet spot no matter how loud you need to be.
Yeah.
Right? But if I were to run it cleaner even,
and by the way, that cool Marshall-y tone, that's, if you have the pack, that's the highest number, I think it's a 5.
Okay.
Vibrato channel 5 capture, or whatever the highest is, it's that sound.
Yeah, and again, you'll notice even if I run this and start it here at 10, it's not going to have nearly that much gain. That sounds a little bit more like 5 or 6,
A little over edge breakup.
Yeah. great thing about this, that's with the bass on 1, 2. So if I wanted to bring it up, I could bring the bass up to about 5, which I wouldn't do if I was doing big, chunky, one of the Marshally thing. But if I wanted just a little bit more gain, maybe this is my clean channel, and this is what I'm using for my, you know, kind of fatter tones, if you will. It still cleans up nicely. I've got my volume back at about 5, middle. Start to hear a little flub right there, but we've got the amp up pretty loud, and that's on the neck pickup. We expect that, but punchy. A little bit different character in the normal channel. You may like, to me, it's not got as tight of a feeling. It's a little bit looser, which is why, again, I think most people prefer the vibrato channel. But those are my go-to tones in this amp.
Yeah. Let's hear it with like a Telecaster and a much worse guitar player. That's me. All right, I'll plug in. All right, let's push it. Give me a little more.
All right,
where are we at?
That's it. 4. Let's go to.
Okay, so these pickups are pushing less than than the Kremis.
Let's go to like 6.5.
Okay. I don't have that treble bleed that you do. So when I pull the volume back,
a little bit. Yeah.
It gets darker, but yeah, it still
that
cleans
works
up
on a
nice.
telly. That works on a single coil guitar. I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's hear it on 10 for fun.
Okay.
We'll leave the bass in.
This guitar, it's not staying, it needs new strings. It's not staying in tune. But man,
it's in tune enough for rock.
That's a killer sound. Now, as promised, we are going to compare this thing to a modern one. I have a Alessandro Rebuilt Deluxe. So what that is George Alessandro, who is well known, like he builds stuff for John Mayer. His stuff is he makes a line of speakers that are very highly, used to replicate vintage tones. So he takes a standard 65 Deluxe reissue from Fender, completely guts the thing. I don't understand why he does it this way. It must be the most cost-effective way for him to do it. He completely guts the amp and uses just the chassis, essentially, and rebuilds the entire thing from the spec from 1965 with parts that he hand selects to replicate essentially what this is. This is a 67. We didn't talk about this, but Fender, was it 64 when they got purchased by CBS?
Yeah, would have been late 64.
So like into 67, they're still using the parts that they had from the pre-CBS buyout.
Yes.
But after 67, 68, things start to change. So the 67 is going to be very, very similar to a 65.
Yes.
64.
The biggest difference, if you see a 64 or even some late 63s, it will say Fender Electric Instrument Company.
Oh, what is that?
As opposed to on the front is Fender Musical Instruments, so that it's like post-buyout branding.
Alessandro is a part-for-part rebuild of one of these. The differences are going to be in the part tolerances because they're made with modern parts.
Yes.
The use that it's been through. The other big difference in that, also the tubes that are used in it, but the other big difference is the speaker. So this one has the original Oxford. The Alessandro has the Alessandro branded, it's made by Weber. The Alessandro branded GA12 SC64 or something. I'll subtitle it. But it is a speaker that Alessandro specs, built by Weber, that is meant to sound like one of these.
Yes.
It's meant to sound like an old Oxford or an old Jensen, which those sound slightly different.
And I do like that speaker a lot.
Old.
It sounds great. I've played it in quite a few different amps. And I think that he has done a very excellent job.
They're very
with
good.
that. And frankly, you're way more likely to get one of those that sounds good versus even an old one. Because some of the old ones have just been dogged out and you have no idea until you've played it.
Anyway, here's the comparison, and then we'll come back with a little bit of our thoughts. All right, so this is the Alessandro. First of all, the gain staging is way different.
Way different.
You know, and so Bradford and I compared our C30s. I have a 94, he has a 2023.
Right.
And it was the same sort of thing. The gain staging was different. And that comes down to component variances and things like that. So you had your 67's right back here.
Yep.
I know you might be able to see it through the thing. The Alessandro, we had to turn up to like 6 to get the same, from what we could tell from just memory hearing it seconds ago, the same as what was on 3 on yours.
Yeah.
And then for the clean sample, we left it at 5 and 5.
Yep.
And it sounded different. Riggs looked at me, he's like, it sounds so different.
It's shocking being like so used to that amp. And I know, again, for me it's different, but even for you in the room, like you haven't heard that amp in a couple of months now or a month. It's very interesting to hear how different they are.
Yeah.
And even like with my Deluxe, like if the volume's set on 2, it just sounds like you haven't turned the amp on. Like it's like it doesn't work. It's like you have to get it like 2.5 to 3.
Tube amps are like that.
Hard to beat that. Hard to beat the 67 on 3 with some verb.
That's true.
And the reverb feels different too. Now
it does.
I'm a bit used to it.
That's
and
an old tank versus a new tank.
Yep.
New,
older spring, got a little bit more warble to it maybe.
For the dirty sound, your 67 was at 6.
Yep.
And bass and treble were still at 5. I turned this one up to 8.5 to get the same level of breakup. And then it was really dark and like woofy on the bottom. So that's when I turned the treble to 6 and the bass to 4. And it kind of got the same sort of, at least in our ears, EQ sound, but it still sounded way different.
Yeah, it's like the overall EQ of the amps is shockingly different. I even think even if you're watching on a phone on YouTube, like they do not sound like the same amp, same family, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, like, when we say shockingly different, it's not like going from this to, like, a dual rectifier.
Right, yeah. But for it to be like, oh, okay, this is a deluxe reverb.
Yeah.
This is a deluxe reverb.
They're supposed to be the same-ish.
I was surprised it was that different.
But they're not the same-ish. They both sound really good.
Yes,
Don't get it. There's not a bad sounding amp between these two.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting comparison.
Very interesting.
So what did you think? I think this one sounds better.
I think this one sounds better. I think now also knowing, of course, there are going to be people in the comments. Like, my ears are biased. I've been listening to this amp a lot over about the past 3 years that I've owned it. The Alessandro sounds great. But if you're looking at the money and you're saying, like, well, the Alessandro is going to run me somewhere in the $2,500, $3,000 range. The market on these changes all the time. You could get lucky like I did.
What are they now, 4,000 to 5,000?
Depending, yeah. I have seen them sell for as high as 5,500.
Yeah.
In very similar condition to this.
In good shape.
In good shape. I think that's a little on the high side, especially with the economy the way it is now. But if you're saying $4,000 to $5,000, you know, for me, I'm looking at something like a 2-Rock as another viable option. And those are great amps, but if I'm going to have to spend $2,000 more on it.
They're like $6,000 to $7,000.
You know, like in that case, I want something like this that is going to appreciate in value because
this is an investment.
They are making more 2-Rocks, and Eli and the team do an incredible job. Those are some of my favorite modern amps. They're not making any more mid-60s black panel deluxes. So,
no, they're not.
For me, for the money, for what it is, like that's not so much money that I'm scared about taking it out. It's not a Dumble. Yeah. It's an incredible amp for someone that's able to make do with it. And again, for me, I own 3 amps. This is one of them, you know, and I'm very, very happy with it. I think this one sounds a little bit better than the Alessandro. So, but is it worth twice as much to be 20% better?
This is not the first time I've A-B'd these 2 amps. And I own the Alessandro. If anyone is going to have a bias toward the Alessandro, it's me, because it's my amp. I was a little sad the first time I heard the both of them back to back, because I was like, I even told you, I was like, this Alessandro sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
And then we played them back to back, and I was like, they're not that good. This one sounds better. Not to say that Alessandro, it's a great sounding amp.
The frequencies are different.
Yeah.
Right? And you would have this, I bet if we had another 67, we could have it in here. Different. And they could be a little different too. Yeah. So who's to say?
And the 64 hand-wired reissue. The 65 reissue is a great amp, and it's, you know, for what it is, it's fairly affordable.
Yeah.
I know that it's a lot of money, whatever. I mean, I know they're well over $1,000, and that's not cheap. But it's a great amp. The 64 hand-wired is a very good amp. But yeah, if you can get your hands on an old one, boy, there's something about them.
And again, they're not making any more. So what's $1,000 more if it's something that when you need to sell it to get your kid to college?
Yeah,
you know, like,
then it'll appreciate. It'll keep getting more. It'll keep getting more valuable.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching. Again, you can get presets based on this. It's the 67 Deluxe Verb worship tutorials. Thank you, Riggs, for hanging out with us.
Had a blast.
Subscribe to Riggs' channel.
Please.
He told me he would like to call his channel Riggs' Riggs, or is that your Instagram handle?
That's my reverb shop, which I do not actually sell on it.
That's a beautiful name.
Yes,
Riggs' Riggs.
I know. Maybe that's a second YouTube channel.
There you go. So subscribe to Riggs on YouTube. It's all linked below. Yeah. And if you haven't subscribed to us, look, there's the counter right there. You need to make that number go up.
Yep. Get to 1 million this year. We can do it over the summer, maybe. We'll see.
Well, that would be a tall order.
That would be a tall order. Let's do it.
I'll give something away. Yeah. I'll give away Riggs' 67 Deluxe.
Maybe. The price of doing business just went up.
See ya.